question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learn about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlopetri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlopetri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlopetri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yanaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yanaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yanaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The Triangle Pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yanaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world. No man shall ever find my tomb. That's what, according to rumors, Cleopatra once said. Rumor has it really wasn't about the gender. She wanted no living soul to disturb her, and I think she meant that no human would ever discover the location of her grave. But, surprisingly, it was indeed a woman who was closer than anyone before to finally discovering the Queen's resting place. Meet Kathleen Martinez Berry, a criminal lawyer turned archaeologist. She got so intrigued with Cleopatra's story that she packed her bags and went to Egypt with no official support and even no permission from the authorities. All she had was pure determination to find the Queen's tomb. Now, you could say Kathleen had always been ahead of the game. She skipped grades in school, mastered piano, chess, swimming, and martial arts, and grew up listening to top intellectuals debating in her home. And she even got her law degree at just 19, and archaeology was her side passion. She had never actually been to Egypt, never dug up a single artifact. But her fascination with Cleopatra went all the way back to an argument with her father in 1990. That day, she walked into his library looking for a copy of Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare. Her dad, Fausto Martinez, a professor and legal expert, casually called Cleopatra a seductress. Kathleen wasn't having it. She fired back, arguing that history had been totally unfair to Cleopatra. The Romans, she said, wanted to destroy her reputation, and for centuries, people had just believed their version of the story. The debate went on for hours, and in the end, her father admitted maybe he had judged Cleopatra too harshly. That conversation changed everything for Kathleen. From that day on, she read every ancient text she could find, especially Plutarch's account of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Cleopatra wasn't just some queen who fell for the wrong guy. She was a genius, playing a dangerous political game to keep Egypt independent. And the more she read, the more she started thinking, what if everyone had been looking for Cleopatra's tomb in the wrong place? That thought stuck with her. When she was caring for her second child, she earned a master's in archaeology. Multitasking. That reignited an obsession that would take over her life, uncovering the truth about Cleopatra. Even though most experts believe that Cleopatra's tomb, along with the final resting place of 13 other Ptolemaic rulers, lies somewhere beneath modern-day Alexandria, Dr. Martinez has a different idea. She believes Cleopatra was buried at Taposiris Magna, an ancient temple dedicated to Osiris, the Egyptian deity of the afterlife. But she still needed an ancient foundation plate. These plates, about the size of a smartphone, were placed beneath important temple structures and often contained inscriptions explaining when and why the temple was built. If she could find a plate that confirmed the temple was dedicated to Isis, Cleopatra's patron deity, she'd have solid proof that this was the right place to look. Nothing could deter Martinez. She excavated the entire temple site, digging deeper than anyone before her. Her team found coins with Cleopatra's name and face stamped on them. It meant Cleopatra had a direct connection to this site. Then, they uncovered something even more interesting: a tunnel used to bring water to people, leading straight from the temple into the Mediterranean Sea. So, if parts of the temple had already sunken into the water, could Cleopatra's tomb be down there too? Martinez needed proof to convince Egyptian authorities to let her search underwater. And, against all odds, she found the missing foundation plate. On it, the pharaoh offered a large area of Nubia to deity Isis. That was it, the confirmation she needed. The temple was indeed dedicated to Isis, proving her theory wasn't just speculation. If one temple was on land, Martinez suspected the second temple, possibly Cleopatra's tomb, had collapsed into the sea. She needed help from experts in underwater archaeology, so she reached out to Robert Ballard, the guy who discovered the Titanic. With support from the Egyptian authorities, she and her team began exploring the waters off the coast of Alexandria. And what they found was mind-blowing. Underwater, they discovered massive stone structures, some standing 6 to 10 feet tall, right where the coastline would have been thousands of years ago. They also found basalt blocks, the same material used in the statues from the first temple. That meant one thing: those weren't just random rocks. They were the remains of a lost city, buried beneath the sea for centuries. Now, we can only wait and see whether Martinez and her team will be able to unravel one of the greatest mysteries of the past left by the outstanding woman that was Cleopatra. Here's some backstory. After her father, Ptolemy VII, passed away, Egypt's throne went to both Ptolemy VIII and Cleopatra, or so it seemed. Cleopatra, just 18 at the time, allegedly married her 10-year-old brother. Yeah, ancient royalty had some different customs, though there's no solid proof of that. But sibling love didn't last long. Young Ptolemy decided he wanted all the power for himself and tried to push Cleopatra out. Forced to flee the country, she didn't just sit around feeling sorry for herself. she raised an army, ready to march back and take what was hers. That's how, at 21, she was already in the Sinai Desert, leading an army and planning her return to the throne. Now, by that time, Cleopatra had already been locked in a powerful political, and not only political, alliance with Julius Caesar. In June 47 BC, she gave birth to a son, Ptolemy Caesar, better known as Caesarion, who, many believe, was Caesar's child. But that didn't stop her from playing by Egyptian royal rules. And her husband number 2, her other brother, Ptolemy XIV. Yep, despite her ongoing affair with Caesar, Cleopatra married yet another sibling, because, in her world, keeping the throne in the family was the name of the game. Now, marriage aside, Cleopatra's bond with Caesar stayed strong. She even traveled to Rome with Ptolemy XIV for a state visit. But instead of playing the role of a dutiful queen, she stayed in Caesar's private villa by the Tiber River. But after Julius Caesar lost his life in 44 BCE on the Ides of March, Cleopatra's political standing became shaky. To make matters worse, her brother-husband Ptolemy XIV passed away soon after, and some suspect Cleopatra had a hand in it, leaving her as the sole ruler of Egypt. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Mark Antony was rising to power as Caesar's presumed successor. Wanting to size up the Queen of Egypt, he summoned Cleopatra, and she did not disappoint. Sailing into town on a lavish barge dressed as a deity, Cleopatra made quite an entrance. Antony was instantly mesmerized, so much so that he left his third wife back in Rome and followed Cleopatra to Alexandria, where their relationship turned into a full-blown royal affair. The two had 3 children together. Together, they waged war against Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, in a battle for control of the Roman Empire. The last time the queen was seen, she was in her mausoleum, dressed in full royal splendor, diadem on her head, lying on what Plutarch called a golden couch. When Antony and Cleopatra lost at Actium, Octavian's forces marched into Alexandria. Cleopatra apparently knew the end was near, so she locked herself inside her mausoleum, surrounded by gold, silver, pearls, and priceless art. Those were the treasures she threatened to burn rather than let the Romans take them. Antony, meanwhile, wasn't going to let the Romans capture him alive. He wounded himself with his own sword, but before he passed away, he was carried to Cleopatra's side. She held him as he took his last breath in her arms. A little over a week later, Cleopatra made her own choice. Rather than face humiliation as Octavia's prisoner, she ended her life. Legend says it was the bite of a deadly asp, though history isn't quite clear on that. At the time, Cleopatra was only 39. Sounds like a rather full life to me.
There's a tiny island surrounded by the stunning clear Red Sea and a bustling underwater world. Zabargad, also known as St. John's Island, has no trees and consists mostly of peridotite, which is rich in peridot. And before you Google it, peridotite is a gemstone that has the nickname the Evening Emerald because of its sparkling green hue. Some historians believe Cleopatra herself loved peridots, and that lady could afford any jewels in the world. Geologists believe peridot forms as a result of the spreading of the seafloor. When the Earth's crust decides to part ways, rocks from deep down get pushed up to the surface. That's exactly how our treasure island formed. The African and the Asiatic continental plates bumped into each other, and rocks in the lower crust went above sea level. Peridot also comes from meteorites that have crashed into Earth, but that's really rare. Its color ranges from a brown-green color to yellowish-green to pure green. Yellowish-green is the most common shade you'll see in jewelry. This color is possible thanks to a good amount of iron in the stone. The deposits of this beauty are spread all across the world, from Vietnam to Arizona and Hawaii, Tanzania, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Norway. And then, of course, there's Zabargad. So, this place is geologically unique as it's an island built of uplifted mantle, and it's also the oldest and longest known source of peridots in the world. The first people came here for the gemstones many centuries ago. Famous Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder mentioned in his writings that pirates had discovered Zabargad's treasures in the year 500 before the current era. The beautiful green rocks made their way to Queen Bernice of the Roman Empire. They came from the ancient trading port Berenike on the edge of Egypt's eastern desert. When the city fell in the 6th century, all work stopped, and the island with all its treasures stood alone for hundreds of years. In the 19th century, British explorers found the beautiful green island in the Red Sea and figured out it was the one described by Pliny the Elder a long time ago. Turkey did some mining here in the 20th century. Over just 4 years, they managed to collect over $2 million in peridots. They sent the gemstones to France for cutting. The work conditions on the island were nothing like a tropical fairy tale you could imagine. There was no drinking water for workers, so they had to install a gas-powered water condenser. Now, this territory belongs to the Elba National Park System. Most people come here to see the underwater beauties of the reefs, but if you look above the water, you can still see some beautiful sparkling peridots. If Christmas Island in Australia is on your travel list, plan the trip wisely. If you end up there in October or November when the wet season begins, you won't be able to enjoy a walk around. Red crabs cover the whole island like a blanket. And it's not one of those fluffy blankets you want to wrap yourself into. Over 100 million crabs are on a mission to reach the shore alive, marking a crucial phase in their life cycle. For the majority of the year, these red crabs reside in burrows and rock crevices. They have fruits, berries, fallen leaves, and various organic matter to keep them going. But when the dry season is over and the moon is in a specific phase, they know it's time to go. When they reach the coast of the Indian Ocean after several days of migration, they create deep burrows where females will eventually hatch their eggs. Once the burrows are ready, the male crabs return to the rainforests and the females stay at the beach for at least 12 days to keep the family going. The new parents are so smart, they follow the moon to pick the perfect moment with a milder tide to carry their eggs to the water. Once they hatch, the crabs bring their new family members back inland. There, they wait for the rainy season again to keep the circle of life going. To safeguard this magic, authorities close road in areas where crab migration takes place. Japan has a brand new addition to its archipelago. The world's newest landmass literally popped up in November 2023. This unnamed island is just over 300 feet in diameter. It's made of pumice and tuff left by an undersea volcano that kicked off its eruptions in October. The volcanic hustle has quieted down since then, and the waves are eroding chunks of the newly found land. Without lava flows to create a sturdy protective crust over the soft volcanic debris, the future of this freshly formed island is unstable. Similar islands had popped up before but were short-lived and vanished once volcanic activity ceased. An island born in 2021 the same way is still visible today though, so the newborn island might have some life prospects. If not, we're likely to see more territories like this. Japan is super rich in active volcanoes on land, with over 100 in its collection. If you make friends with the Uros people living in the Lake Titicaca area and ask them for their address to send a postcard, they will have a hard time answering. Their ancestors from more than 500 years ago came up with a brilliant invention to protect themselves from the Incas. They built islands from totora roots and reeds that could be moved away from danger deep into the lake. Totora plants help the local community a lot since it's water-resistant and is used for all sorts of things, from building boats to roofs and mattresses. The islets are even edible, and the flowers of the plant they're made of are used for tea. So there are around 120 islets still preserved, and over 1,000 people can live on them. From 2 to 6 families share one islet home. Since there's no need to run away from the Incas anymore, they need to make sure the islets stay in one place. Every 15 to 20 days, the reeds forming the islets decay and need to be replaced. To prevent constant drifting, locals use eucalyptus rods as anchors, firmly securing the islets. Despite their small size, these islets have 2 spoken languages. The residents craft their fabric and create stunning outfits. Solar panels provide sufficient power for them to have light and even TVs. The main islet has a radio station, and the locals have embraced tourism. You can make a reservation online and experience the floating life yourself. Some islands pop out of nowhere, and others disappear without a trace. One of the most famous so-called phantom islands is Hy-Brasil off the coast of Ireland. Before you ask, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Brazil. Hy is a variation of I, which means island, and Brazil comes from the root bres, meaning mighty, great, beautiful in Irish, and it gave the name to one of the local deities. This tiny mist-covered island was first mapped in 1325, but later attempts to pinpoint its exact location didn't come to one result. So, legend has it that the island appears only once in 7 years, and even those who claim to have seen it say they had just sailed right through it without bumping into any land. Captain John Nisbet shared the story of how he had not only spotted Hy-Brasil, but got stranded on it with his crew. According to him, the island boasted a castle and was mostly uninhabited. There was even an encounter with an ancient grave gentleman who shared the island's ancient history over a lavish feast. In the late 15th century, a series of expeditions set sail from Bristol to find the famous island. All attempts failed, and Hy-Brasil disappeared from the maps in 1865. We might never find out if it was there in the first place, but it's a beautiful story anyway.
So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamun's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti-Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then. so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage and a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh?
This is not a dune set. This is a very real desert in Niger. Djado was probably built by the nomadic Sao people and is filled with ksars, which are fortified houses made of salt and clay, with giant walls and secret passages. Located deep in the desert, it was once a vital stop for trans-Saharan caravans, but is now a hotspot for smugglers and bandits. The site has been off-limits since 2002 due to its dangers. The origin of the ksars remain a mystery. No archaeological studies have been conducted, leaving many questions unanswered. Even today, shifting sands reveal and conceal parts of these ancient ruins, fueling local speculation about what might still be hidden beneath the desert. Speaking of connective tunnels, scientists were blown away by the discovery of lava tubes in Saudi Arabia. These underground passages form when molten lava cools down. Researchers believe that ancient nomadic groups may have utilized these tunnels to survive the super harsh desert climates. While excavating the tunnels, archaeologists uncovered artifacts, rock art, and skeletal remains. The art and animal bones show that the people who used the tunnels were probably sheep and goat herders. They're still piecing together whether these groups lived in the tunnels for extended periods or just used them as temporary shelters. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for thousands of years, but it's still hiding secrets. Using special scanning technology, scientists found two hidden structures under an ancient burial ground. The first is a shallow L-shaped structure, and below it is a much larger space that could be a final resting place or a chamber. The smaller structure was filled with sand on purpose, while the deeper one might be an empty chamber. Experts believe the two are connected, possibly as an entrance leading to a secret chamber. This is big news because it might give us some more insight into who built the pyramids and why. The world is full of ancient writing, but some messages refuse to give up their secrets, like the mystery of the Bash-Plemi tablet. This unusual stone, pulled from a lake in Georgia, is covered in symbols no one can read. Even with modern technology, experts are completely stumped. The tablet is about the size of a book, with 60 symbols carefully carved into its surface, but 39 of them don't match any known language. Some resemble scripts from ancient civilizations in the Middle East, India, and Egypt, but none are an exact match. To make things even trickier, part of the tablet is broken off, meaning a piece of the puzzle is missing forever. To rule out a hoax, scientists studied the tablet closely. They confirmed it's made of vesicular basalt, an extremely tough local rock. Whoever carved these symbols must have been really skilled. Based on similar archaeological finds, experts believe the tablet could date back thousands of years, possibly to the late Bronze or early Iron Age. Some symbols repeat, which could mean they're numbers. Maybe it's an inventory list, a record of battles, or even an offering to the deities. Until someone cracks the code, the Bashplemi tablet remains an unsolved mystery from the depths of history. Experts are still stumped with what this Minoan disc might mean. The Phaistos disc is one of the most mysterious finds from the Minoan civilization. This 6-inch clay object, discovered in 1908, has strange spiral markings that no one has fully decoded yet. The disc has 241 symbols on both sides, showing everything from people and animals to tools and plants. Experts have come up with many theories about what the symbols mean. Some think it's an early form of Greek. Others suggest it's a prayer or a hymn. And some even believe it could be a letter from a king in Anatolia to a Greek ruler. Let's see who will be the first to figure this out. It's always a fun day at an archaeologist's office when they find something as big as a 2,000-year-old marble head. A French archaeologist mission went digging inside an old medieval house near Alexandria in Egypt and found a statue's head depicting an old, possibly ill man. This statue dates from the last Egyptian dynasty before it became part of the Roman Empire, and the site where it was found is associated with the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. For archaeologists, even the smallest finds at this site means a lot. You've heard of Lucy, right? The Australopithecus that was an early ancestor for us humans. Well, scientists found some of her species' footprints somewhere in Tanzania. The so-called Laetoli footprints are over 3 million years old. The trail stretched 88 feet and has about 70 footprints, left behind when a bunch of early humans walked across some wet volcanic ash. What's cool is that these early humans were already walking on 2 feet, like us, not all hunched over like apes. The close spacing of the prints shows they probably had short legs and a shorter stride than we do today. In an ancient Egyptian temple, archaeologists uncovered a shrine unlike any other. A place dedicated to falcons and 2 mysterious deities. One deity had a falcon's head, while the other wore a crown with a sun disk and cow horns. But the most baffling discovery was an inscription that read, "It is improper to boil a head in here." At the heart of the shrine, there are 15 headless falcons carefully arranged on a pedestal, likely as offerings to the falcon-headed deity. One theory suggests the birds were boiled first, perhaps to pluck their feathers, before being placed in the shrine, following the strange rule carved into stone. Archaeologists also found a 13-inch iron harpoon nearby. Its true purpose remains unknown, although the shrine also held remains of fish, mammals, and bird eggs, suggesting that the rituals may have included feasting. And speaking of ancient Egypt, meet Hathor. Scientists named her after the ancient Egyptian deity of motherhood, music, and singing. This wooden statue, housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was thought to be just a beautiful artifact, until a surprising secret was uncovered. Using an X-ray machine, experts found a mechanical operating system inside it, with pulleys and axles connecting her shoulder to her left leg. When activated, the system made her hand raise and lower, an engineering marvel from over 3,000 years ago. The statue was created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, and is often compared to 19th century automata due to its advanced design. It's believed the statue was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing Hathor's role in dance and music. An unexpected discovery happened in northern Kuwait, where a Kuwaiti-Polish team uncovered a mysterious 7,500-year-old statue. The statue features an elongated skull, no mouth, narrow eyes, and a flattened nose. This feature is thought to be an Ophidian figurine, named after the Greek word for snake, and it was likely made by the Ubaid culture, a civilization known for their pottery skills. While no one knows exactly what role this weird statue played, it might have been linked to rituals or symbolic practices. Some scientists think these figurines found in homes or final resting places, were tied to important cultural beliefs. We couldn't mention unresolved mysteries of this world without speaking about these elongated skulls. In the deserts of Peru, researchers uncovered 5 ancient skeletons, 2 with unnaturally elongated skulls. While head shaping was common in many cultures, these skulls defy explanation. Local legends tell tales of the so-called Gentiles, a mysterious race banished underground by the powerful deities. Some say this is what the skulls represent. Others think this is some type of genetic anomaly, which was confirmed after finding an infant skull, too large to be artificially shaped.
Secant, cosine, tangent, sine, 3.14159. Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think, but wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there, as a man walks past you with a bucket of paint. He's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid, And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a great pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on, and that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Transamerica Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas. Scientists have recently discovered Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages under a medieval castle in Italy. They followed a newly found 15th century sketch by the creator of the Mona Lisa and found one of the unexplored architectural wonders from the age of the Renaissance. Construction of the Sforza Castle started back in 1358, but it was destroyed about a century later during a local crisis. Then, in 1450, Francesco Sforza, the Duke of Milan, decided to rebuild it on the old ruins. After he passed away, his son Ludovico took over and kept improving the castle. He brought in some of the best artists of the time, including Leonardo da Vinci, to decorate its walls. We can still see Leonardo's frescoes today in the Room of Wooden Boards. While he was working at the castle, da Vinci also recorded some historical underground passages hidden beneath the outer wall. The drawing, dated between 1487 and 1490, was found at the Institut de France in Paris. The sketch is highly precise, and it proves that Leonardo was really interested in fortification design and was great at documenting existing structures. Historical records show that Ludovico ordered the building of an underground passageway that led straight to a basilica, where his wife was buried. Ludovico married Beatrice in 1491, and they had a happy but tragically short marriage, as Beatrice passed away while giving birth in 1497. The Duke locked himself away for weeks, grew a beard, and wore only black clothes while he was mourning his beloved wife. The secret tunnel may have stretched over a half a mile and would let Ludovico visit her grave in private. It could have served as an escape route if the castle was ever under siege. The existence of the tunnels remained one of the mysteries of the Renaissance for years, as no one knew for sure they were there. But now, scientists finally uncovered the secret history. They used a combination of ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning to build up an accurate 3D model of all the structures under the castle. They found the tunnels da Vinci alluded to in his drawings, and it looks like they may have only been a small part of a whole system of historical underground passages. The goal is to create a complete digital twin of the castle that will not only show all the preserved constructions, but also the ancient ones that are no longer visible. They also plan to add augmented reality to the virtual paths to let visitors discover Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages. Now, we don't know if the genius actually took part in constructing the hidden passages that scientists recently discovered, but we do know about some other Leonardo da Vinci inventions. He created the first satellite-like map in 1502, long before photography or satellites were even a concept. A famous figure in Italy, Cesare Borgia, invited Leonardo to a small town called Imola, near Bologna, to create a highly detailed map for him. Back then, maps were not very precise, as no one had figured out how to show exact distances on a smaller scale. Instead, people spent a lot of time decorating them with dragons, roses, fancy castles, mountain ranges, flowers, and other artistic details. These maps look more like beautiful paintings meant to be displayed, rather than practical tools for navigation. But Cesare Borgia wanted something truly functional, and Leonardo managed to create something revolutionary in the field of cartography. If you compare satellite images of Imola today with Leonardo's map, the similarities are striking. He captured every alley, curve of the streets, roadways, and even the exact sizes of the buildings. And he did it all by hand, using just a pencil, ruler, compass, and several of his own clever inventions. To gather all the necessary data, the genius walked through the streets for weeks using a large wheel that spun as he moved, recording the distance with a cable. Using the magnetic compass, he determined precise directions. He also developed a tool called the bussola, which measured angles inside a circle. With this, he could track the exact turns of each street and the size of the intersections. He figured out the distances between houses and major roads. Then, back at home, he used his notes and calculations to draw the map to scale with incredible precision. In his work, Da Vinci also used a technique developed by Florentine humanist Leon Battista Alberti. He created a mapping method where you could place an entire city inside a circle using polar coordinates. At the center of the city, 8 straight lines met, representing the main directions of a compass. Leonardo used this system to divide the town into 8 sections. He didn't overlook even the smallest buildings, which made his map one of the most advanced of its time. The Italian genius had a big dream to build a machine that could let people fly. He studied how birds, bats, and kites moved through the air and designed a special flying machine. He believed that if he could copy their movements, humans might be able to soar like them. Da Vinci's design looked a lot like a bat, with two large pointed wings that stretched over 33 feet wide. He planned to build the frame from lightweight pine wood and cover it with raw silk to make it strong but not too heavy. The person flying it would lie on their stomach on a wooden board in the center. To make the wings flap, the pilot had to pedal a crank with their feet, which was connected to a system of rods and pulleys. There was also a hand crank for extra power and even a headpiece to help steer. As the person moved their hands and feet, the wings would flap and twist, just like a bird's. But there was one big problem. Humans aren't strong enough to make the machine lift off the ground. Even though it might have worked once in the air, there was no way for a person to get it flying on their own. Leonardo probably realized this, but his amazing idea still inspired flying machines that came centuries later. Da Vinci was way ahead of his time with many of his inventions, but his idea for a humanoid robot was especially futuristic. He was working under the patronage of the Sforza family, the one that had those ancient tunnels of Italy built. The genius designed a mechanical knight that could move its arms, turn its neck, and even open and close its mouth. Da Vinci had good knowledge of anatomy and the mechanics of body movements that helped him. His unusual creation used an external system of cables. A hand crank set it in motion, and there was also an internal gear-driven mechanism. About 450 years later, Da Vinci's detailed sketches of the robotic knight were rediscovered in the 1950s. Several researchers tried to recreate the robot from those sketches. In 2002, a roboticist who developed systems for NASA and Lockheed Martin took inspiration from the old notes and built a functioning model of Da Vinci's robotic knight. Another design Leonardo created for Duke Sforza was a special kind of bridge that could be taken apart and carried easily. It was made for defense forces who needed to cross rivers or moats while traveling. This bridge would swing across the water and land on the other side. It had wheels and used a rope and pulley system, so it could be set up quickly and packed away just as fast. To keep it steady, it even had a special weight to help balance it. Leonardo wrote in his notes that the bridge was light yet strong, and he designed several bridges like this for the Duke. One of his other designs was a bridge that could be built very quickly, and the defense forces would move across multiple rivers. As scientists continue to study Leonardo da Vinci's hidden passages, they reveal new chapters in human history. Who knows what other unexplored architectural structures they will find? Well, there you are. The sun is scorching, you're thirsty. All you can think about is water and ancient bones under your feet. You're wandering through the Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth. Right now, you're crossing a stretch of sand called Whale Valley. And all over these 75 square miles of land, fossils cover the ground so thickly that you can't help but step on them. Paleontologist Hesham Salam says it's an unusual picture in this place. The bones are poking right out of the cliffs, as if they're calling to you to come check them out. You can spot ribs scattered all over the place. Look at these vertebrae. They're giant. Ooh, the creature they once belonged to must have been up to 65 feet long. The fossils show that the animal had a streamlined body like today's whale, but still had features like hind legs and feet. For scientists, it means a very exciting thing. They might have discovered a fully intact skeleton of a prehistoric whale. It was an animal that lived in this area when Egypt was underwater. You see, today, the Valley of the Whales is the world's largest ancient whale graveyard. You're likely wondering what marine animals are doing in a desert more than 100 miles away from the nearest coast. Well, millions of years ago, this desert was at the bottom of a massive ocean called the Tethys, which stretched from Europe to India. When sea levels dropped, the ocean left behind a seabed covered with fossils. And today, the fossils of some of the earliest known whales rest here, which gives researchers a peek into how today's massive ocean whales may have evolved. The fossils here are super detailed. even with some stomach contents still intact. Uh-oh. Scientists have also found fossils of ancient sharks, crocodiles, and turtles, helping to recreate what this marine world looked like millions of years ago. Now, the first whale bones were discovered in 1902, but it wasn't until the 1980s that people really started to explore the area, only when access to this area became better. Sadly, some fossils had been taken away by collectors before the site turned into a protected area. Most of the fossils are just under the surface, slowly revealed by erosion. Whale Valley gives us an amazing glimpse into millions of years of ancient coastal marine life. But let's move further. Ancient whale fossils aren't the only discovery you're going to make today. For over 150 years, scientists have been puzzled by a strange creature that lived millions of years ago. But now, thanks to some amazing fossils found in Morocco, they've finally figured it out. Look at them. These creatures are called blah blah blah. Nah, I'm kidding. Styophorans. They look like flattened armor with a long arm sticking out. Researchers discovered these creatures in 2014 and were shocked. The fossils dated back around 478 million years. They found around 450 specimens, and to their surprise, some even had soft tissues preserved, which is super rare. Before this, they only knew Styophorans from their hard parts. Originally, scientists thought these creatures were good old echinoderms, animals like sea urchins and starfish. But new discoveries prove that they had a core body and feeding arm similar to modern starfish, complete with a water vascular system to help them move and eat. This finding ends a long debate about where Styophorans fit in the animal family tree. Now we know they're related to echinoderms, but are more advanced because they don't have the typical 5-ray symmetry. Ooh, come here and look at this giant fossil. It was found in the Sahara and gave scientists new insights into the Spinosaurus, the largest carnivorous dinosaur we know about. These 95 million-year-old remains also confirm that it was the first known swimming dinosaur. The Spinosaurus had flat paddle-like feet and nostrils on the top of its crocodile-like head, perfect for staying underwater. It was a pretty weird dinosaur with a long neck, trunk, tail, and a 7-foot sail on its back, so it must have spent a lot of time in the water. At over 50 feet long, Spinosaurus might have been even larger than T-Rex. The first Spinosaurus remains were discovered about 100 years ago in Egypt, but only this new fossil, found in Morocco, helped scientists reconstruct this dinosaur for the first time. Researchers paid attention to the creature's shorter hind limbs and wide claws. These features point to adaptations for life in the water. Its snout and dense bones also suggest it was a swimmer, while its spiked tail likely attracted mates. Hey, good looking, come here often? And here's another astonishing find made in Tunisia, the remains of Machimosaurus rex. Now, so far it's believed to be the biggest crocodile ever. This ancient croc was about 32 feet long and weighed around 66,000 pounds. It was a top predator around 130 million years ago, and its skull was over 5 feet long. Now, this discovery is a big deal because it shows that these crocs stuck around longer than we thought. Before this, scientists believed that they disappeared during a minor extinction event between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Now, let's go back to the fact that the Sahara was once underwater, and some of the largest sea creatures ever lived there. A study published in the Bulletin of the American Museum of Natural History speaks about an ancient body of water called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. It existed between 150 million years ago, covering parts of Western Africa. Scientists spent 2 decades trying to recreate this prehistoric underwater world. They found it was warm and shallow, home to some pretty terrifying creatures, including 5-foot-long catfish and 40-foot-long sea snakes. Yikes! The seaway was cut off from larger oceans for long stretches, which may have helped these predators grow larger because resources were always available. It's a classic case of evolution at work, leading to what scientists call gigantism in isolated environments. But all that water didn't just disappear with no trace. Under the sands of the Sahara, scientists have discovered a massive ancient lake, which they're calling a megalake. Makes sense. This lake formed around 250,000 years ago when the Nile River flooded the eastern Sahara. At its biggest, this lake covered over 42,000 square miles. It's about half as big as Kansas. They also found evidence of a smaller lake, 93 miles west of the Nile, at a slightly lower level and covering 18,600 square miles. All of this adds to growing evidence that once, North Africa had many lakes that might have created migration routes, helping early humans move across the continent. Now, in the Sahara, you can find not only fossils of bizarre animals. In May 2020, some weird rocks with greenish crystals were discovered in a sandy region in southern Algeria's Sahara Desert. When scientists checked them out, they found out these rocks weren't from Earth. They were actually pieces of a meteorite called Erg-Czech 002. This meteorite is super old, like the oldest volcanic rock ever found. It melted ages ago in the fiery heart of an ancient protoplanet that no longer exists. Researchers had recently published a study in Nature Communications, revealing that they have analyzed lead and uranium isotopes in Erg-Czech 002 and found out it's more than 4.5 billion years old. Another cool discovery made in the Sahara is quite unexpected. A few years ago, scientists found what they think are the world's oldest colors, and they're bright pink. These pigments were uncovered from rocks that are around 1.1 billion years old in the Sahara Desert. The colors came from microscopic organisms, as animals didn't exist back then. The discovery was made by a PhD student who crushed the ancient rocks and analyzed the pigments. These pink pigments are actually ancient chlorophyll from photosynthetic organisms that lived in an ocean that's long gone. Researchers are now sure that this finding could help explain why larger, complex creatures showed up much later in Earth's history. Before these colors were discovered, scientists didn't know what was missing in the food chain that delayed the evolution of larger animals. Now they understand that tiny cyanobacteria were at the bottom of that chain. Apparently, this discovery is not just about finding some old pink stuff. Scientists believe it's a breakthrough in understanding the history of life on Earth.
X-rays are a type of invisible radiation that can pass through our bodies and objects. They're very important in the field of medicine because they allow doctors to see inside our bodies without having to perform surgery. Now, let's dive into how X-rays work. They're a kind of electromagnetic radiation, just like light or radio waves. However, they have much higher energy than light, which makes them able to go through objects that light cannot. Imagine you have a powerful flashlight. If you try to shine it through a wall, the light won't go through because the wall is too thick. But these rays have enough energy to go through walls and even our bodies. The discovery of X-rays happened by accident in the late 19th century. A scientist was experimenting with cathode rays, which are a type of radiation. He was working in his lab and noticed that a nearby fluorescent screen started to glow, even though it was not directly exposed to the cathode rays. He realized that something invisible was causing the fluorescence, and he named it X-ray, because X is the mathematical symbol for something unknown. He continued experimenting with such rays and discovered that they could pass through many objects, like flesh and bones, but not through denser materials like metal. He also found that X-rays could create images on photographic plates, just like a camera takes pictures. The way this works is quite fascinating. Imagine you're standing in front of a bright light and you hold your hand in front of your face. Your hand blocks the light and you can't see through it. But if you place a sheet of tissue paper in front of your hand, some light will pass through, and you'll be able to see the outline of your hand. X-rays work in a similar way. When a doctor wants to take an X-ray of a part of your body, they will ask you to stand or lie down next to a machine. This device has a special plate that can capture the image. Let's say the doctor wants to further examine your arm. They will place the X-ray plate on one side of your arm and the machine on the other side. Then, the machine will produce a controlled burst of X-rays that pass through your arm. Remember how we talked about the tissue paper allowing some light to pass through? Well, in this case, some of those X-rays will go through your arm, while others will be absorbed or blocked by the denser parts of your body, like bones. The plate captures the X-rays that pass through your arm, and it creates an image. This image shows the bones and other structures inside your body, allowing the doctor to see if there are any problems or injuries. Now, you might be wondering why X-rays can pass through some things but not others. It has to do with the density and composition of the objects. Denser materials like bones absorb more X-rays, so they appear white in the image. So when you look at the result, you'll see your bones as white shapes. Other tissues like muscles and organs are less dense and allow some of those rays to pass through, so they appear as gray shadows. What if I told you there's a whole new way you can peek inside objects, but without using X-rays? I'm not talking about magic powers. Take a comfortable seat while I explain what myography is. This fascinating scientific technique allows us to see inside objects and even beneath the Earth's surface using a special type of particle called a muon. These elementary particles are very similar to electrons, but they're much heavier. They are created high up in the Earth's atmosphere when cosmic rays, which are particles coming from space, collide with the air molecules. Now, muons are special because they can pierce through different materials. They can pass through rock, soil, and even buildings. Scientists realized this potential back in the 1950s when they were studying cosmic rays and noticed that some of the particles could pass through thick materials. The first myography experiments took place in the 60s. Specialists discovered that muons can be detected using special devices called muon detectors. These detectors are usually placed underground or in specially designed laboratories to shield them from other particles and background radiation. Now let's dive into how myography actually works. Imagine you have a large object, like a pyramid, a mountain, or even an ancient statue, and you want to see what's inside without damaging it. First, detectors are positioned around the object or in the area you want to examine. These detectors are sensitive to muons and can track their paths. When such a particle passes through a detector, it leaves a trace, like footprints in the sand. By collecting data from multiple detectors, scientists can reconstruct the paths. Here's where things get really cool. The Earth's atmosphere acts like a natural filter for muons. It turns out that the more massive an object is, the more particles it will block. So, if you have a large, dense object like a mountain, fewer muons will pass through it compared to a smaller, less dense object, like an empty box. This difference in the number of particles that reach the detectors can give us clues about what's inside the objects. Scientists use computer algorithms and mathematical techniques to analyze the data and create images. These images represent the density distribution of the object being studied. It's like creating a map that shows where the densest areas are and where there's gaps inside the object. The concept of myography is similar to using shadows to understand the shape and size of an object. Imagine you're standing in front of a bright light and you place your hand between the light source and a wall. You'll see a shadow of your hand on the wall. Based on the shape and size of the shadow, you can get an idea of what your hand looks like, even though you can't see it directly. This technique has been used to study various objects and structures. For example, scientists have used it to explore the inside of volcanoes and pyramids, and even to investigate the structure of mountains and the Earth's crust. With the help of this amazing technique, scientists have now uncovered new information about the Great Pyramid of Giza. They discovered something that had eluded tomb raiders for centuries. They found a hidden chamber. And guess what they named it? The Big Void. Yeah, I know, not the most creative name. They even used 3 different muon detection techniques just to be super sure that it was indeed a big, mysterious void inside the grandest pyramid of them all. Once news got out about this mind-boggling discovery, Egyptian authorities couldn't resist the temptation to explore further. So they brought in an endoscope camera to confirm the existence of this epic void. So they inserted a camera through one of the openings underneath the entrance, and voila, it revealed a corridor. More so, the corridor had a chevron ceiling. I can't help but imagine the ancient Egyptians using it as a cool dance floor. Another team of scientists decided to take another shot at scanning this newfound void. According to them, the Great Pyramid of Giza is a pioneer in the pyramid game. It used a technique called chevron to cover internal structures and keep them from collapsing. Now, why did the ancient Egyptians build this corridor and the grand void it leads to? One theory suggests that the corridor was built to relieve pressure inside the pyramid. Another theory says that the void could be a result of the pyramid's construction process. It could have been an internal ramp used to move roof blocks into position, and then it was left there or filled loosely with rubble. According to other enthusiastic explorers, there might be another burial chamber waiting to be discovered. They believe that the pyramids were built with a dash of randomness in the construction process. As the builders worked their magic, they realized that some chambers wouldn't be able to handle the weight of a majestic sarcophagus. So they made adjustments on the fly, creating new plans as they went along. A Portuguese archaeologist just discovered a bunch of sunken ships filled with gold, including a Spanish galleon with 22 tons of gold and silver. This much gold today is worth about $2 billion, and this is the money from one ship alone. Archaeologist Alexandre Monteiro made this discovery almost by accident. He was studying some documents when he found some information about a ship that went missing in 1615, and he decided he wanted to find it. After many years, Alexandre found not just this specific ship, he actually discovered 8,620 shipwrecks in the waters of Portugal alone. Out of this number, 250 are gold-filled shipwrecks, a discovery that would make any Jack Sparrow shake in his boots. Most of these ships went down for boring reasons like the weather, but sometimes they were destroyed in battles, which may or may not have been super epic. They were carrying gold and other treasures from the New World to Europe, and of course, everyone wanted a share. Alexandre had been studying historical shipwrecks for 30 years now, so he has discovered many ships that went down in somewhat glorious ways. In 1816, for example, a ship of one of the richest men in Portugal sank in Australia, with an insane amount of 66,000 silver coins. This was the first ship from Portugal to ever plunge in the waters of Australia. The bad news is that these ancient sunken vessels, filled with riches and epic stories, are not so easy to reach. They're deep down in the ocean and covered by sand. You could still try, but that would be stealing part of a country's history, and you wouldn't want to be that person, would you? Naturally, Portugal was not the only country that explored the seas back then. The coast of Europe is packed with sunken ships filled with gold. In fact, there are about 1 million historical shipwrecks underwater right now, and the treasures abandoned under the sea might be worth around $60 billion. It's an insane amount of money, but let me tell you that these gold-filled sunken ships aren't really worth the hassle. There are many stories of maritime treasure discoveries that turned into insane lawsuits and even long jail time. Our first story starts in 1746, when a violent storm crashed a ship called Prince de Conti near an island in Brittany. The ship was filled with tea, ceramics, and 100 gold ingots. Of course, the owners of the ship tried to save the loot, but if it's not easy now, imagine how it was back in the 18th century. It took more than 200 years for the vessel to be found. It finally happened in 1975, when a group of French men discovered it and decided to take pretty much every valuable thing they could find. Now, I said these things were not worth the trouble for a reason. In France, if you find anything that can be historical, you must declare it to the local authorities within 48 hours. Fail to comply, and you will be committing something known as a crime. To be fair, our French friends here did declare their findings, but only the corroded cannons from the ship. And the gold? Well, they sold it. Obviously, because each gold bar is worth between $125,000 to $231,000. It took French authorities almost 50 years to retrieve the stolen gold, and they didn't retrieve all of it. Part of it was bought by an elderly couple living in Florida, and the crime is so serious they were charged for connection with money laundering, organized crime, and the trafficking of cultural goods. The poachers also sold some gold ingots to the British Museum collection. Now, let's go back to the 1850s, when a steamer called SS Central America traveled from Panama to California and back again. This was during the California Gold Rush, a time when 300,000 people moved to California to dig for gold. Because the travel route was not easy breezy, people needed to carry their gold around on big ships. This is where our friend SS Central America comes in. In 1857, the ship had 578 people on board and about 10 tons of gold. Very few survived, and around $100 to $150 million in gold went down with the ship. All of this explains why in 1988, a group of investors from Columbus decided to finance a research project to find this ship. The research was led by a guy named Tommy Thompson. Tommy was really crazy about the idea of finding this sunken ship filled with gold. It took him years to find the exact location of the SS Central America, especially because the ship was 7,500 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, and retrieving it required a lot of fancy tech. A group of 161 investors paid for his adventure, but it goes without saying that they were not doing this out of love from their hearts. They invested $12.5 million in this project because they were expecting to earn at least 10 times more. But since life is not all sunshine and rainbows, 39 insurance companies sued the research team as soon as they retrieved the gold. Back when the ship was up and running, these companies insured the cargo of the SS Central America, and when the cargo was finally retrieved, more than 100 years later, they wanted to be compensated. They said it was not their job to retrieve it, but that doesn't mean they abandoned it. This crazy talk didn't stick, and 92% of the gold was given to the research team. The plot thickened when the investors were scammed by none other than Tommy Thompson, who fled with $4.16 million. He also had 500 gold coins, but he's not telling a soul where they are. Nonsense like this is the reason why most countries have rules to protect cultural properties. And yes, sometimes shipwrecks can be a cultural property. Obviously, there are many maritime treasure discoveries that happen without breaking any laws. The SS City of Cairo, for example, was a steamship that submerged in 1929 with 2,000 boxes of silver coins weighing 122 tons. A company called Deep Ocean Search retrieved the coins from a depth of 17,000 feet, which is 4,500 feet lower than the Titanic. 34 million pounds went to the UK Treasury, and the Deep Ocean Search also got a share. The good news here is that some of the coins can be bought by collectors, legally. Paying for a treasure is probably the closest you can get to an underwater archaeology find. I know, all I did was destroy your piracy dreams. But while raiding gold-filled shipwrecks may be a crime in most countries, or just financially impossible for us mere mortals, not all hope is lost. There is about $771 trillion worth of gold lying on the ocean floor, and it doesn't have an owner. It's like an underwater gold mine, except the gold is in the water. You know how the water of the ocean is salty? Well, the gold gets mixed with the minerals in the water, so it's not like you stumble upon a gold nugget on the beach. Each liter of ocean water has 13 billionths of a gram of gold, and it's very difficult to extract such tiny particles of gold from the water. But that doesn't mean people haven't tried, and, of course, there's been a scam here too. In the 1890s, a guy claimed he had invented a thing that would suck gold from the seawater. When he got enough money, he fled the country with the cash. If you really want to get some gold, you could try to extract it from the Earth's core, which has 1.6 quadrillion tons of gold. There's 16 times more gold in the Earth's core than what humans have mined in the whole of history. No hoax involved here, because nobody has dared to go down there yet. With archaeologists discovering gold-filled sunken ships out and about, maybe we can make our own maritime treasure discoveries, or at least save enough money to buy some silver coins. Big news! Santa is real, and he looks like this. I know it's not exactly how we pictured the jolly old guy, but a recently discovered tomb might just be the proof we've been waiting for to show that St. Nicholas was real and Turkish. Turns out he wasn't a North Pole native, but a kind-hearted bishop from the 4th century, famous for giving gifts to everyone. The legend says he was a wealthy man born in the ancient city of Patara, modern-day Turkey, who traveled to the countryside to help the poor and the sick. For centuries, though, people couldn't be sure he actually existed. Some historical sources say he was buried in Myra, which is now called Demre, Turkey. Since the 80s, archaeologists have been digging around this area, trying to prove it. And now, their Christmas miracle has finally come true. After digging 6 feet deep in an annex of St. Nicholas's church, they uncovered a mysterious limestone tomb, about 2 meters long. While they're pretty sure this is St. Nick's final resting place, they're still searching for an inscription to confirm its exact age. Now, if we're talking about the fictional Santa Claus, legend says his home is in Lapland, Finland. Back in 2018, archaeologists made an interesting discovery that could finally prove that Santa was real. They were digging at a site called Tiny Aro when they stumbled upon about 200 burial pits. But when they looked inside, there was definitely no sign of Santa. Actually, there were no human skeletons at all, just a bunch of things like pottery and animal bones. So no one really knows what this place was. That was the complete opposite of what happened with a group of archaeologists working in the ancient city of Petra, Jordan. Since 2003, there have been rumors about hidden chambers beneath the famous monument called Al-Khazneh, also known as the Treasury. 21 years later, a team finally decided to dig and uncovered an intact tomb. Inside, they found at least 12 human skeletons and artifacts estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Al-Khazneh every year, and most of them probably go there to see the site of the Holy Grail in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, do you want to know the funny part? One of the skeletons in the tomb was clutching a ceramic chalice that looked a lot like the Holy Grail. You probably remember the devastating fire that caused massive damage to Notre Dame in Paris back in 2019. Because of that, the building, originally built between the 12th and 13th centuries, had to be restructured. But archaeologists saw it as a golden opportunity to dig into the site and uncover its hidden secrets. The team was only allowed to dig about 16 inches beneath the floor, but that was enough. As soon as they removed the floor tiles and cleared away a thin layer of dirt, they spotted the top of a lead coffin. Then, they found some limestone sculptures, including life-sized heads and torsos. Altogether, they uncovered over 1,000 fragments of different works of art. Ancient statues have been found in the most random places, including a sewer. In July 2024, Bulgarian archaeologists were checking a Roman sewer in the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica when they found a nearly 7-foot-tall marble statue of Hermes, the Greek messenger deity. This town was completely devastated and abandoned after 2 earthquakes, one in the year 388 and the other in the year 425. But somehow, it didn't destroy this statue. In fact, its head was found in surprisingly good condition. Finding ancient artwork is definitely fascinating, but imagine stumbling upon an entire hidden city in the Amazon rainforest. Using high-tech lasers, researchers uncovered a lost civilization with thousands of structures and a whole network of roads, canals, and houses, all buried beneath the dense jungle. This city was built around 2,500 years ago, in an area located in the shadow of a volcano, which, by the way, could have erupted and destroyed this civilization at some point. It's hard to say exactly how many people lived there, but experts estimate they stayed up there for about 1,000 years. This discovery proves ancient people also had huge, organized cities in the middle of the Amazon. A similar thing happened in Campeche in southern Mexico. An archaeologist was doing some research on the internet when he accidentally discovered a hidden Maya city. This area, now called Valeriana, was huge, about the size of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. It had pyramids, sports fields, amphitheaters, and paths connecting different districts. Thanks to satellite images, archaeologists uncovered an entire unknown civilization from the Bronze Age. They were checking out aerial images when they discovered 100 prehistoric settlements in the Pannonian Plain, a region that includes parts of what's now Serbia and Hungary. The people who lived there are now known as the Titsa Site Group, and it looks like they were a pretty well-organized society, skilled at growing food, hunting, and fishing. Google Earth helped a team to uncover a mysterious set of 400 ancient gates in Saudi Arabia. These gates, scattered across the desert, are thought to be from thousands of years ago. They're made of stone and arranged in weird formations that have left archaeologists scratching their heads. I mean, they don't look like they were meant for funerals, and they don't seem like structures where people lived. So, we still have no idea what they are. Technology is really changing archaeology. Thanks to artificial intelligence and, well, a $1 million prize, we've finally been able to decipher part of an unreadable and super damaged ancient scroll. The Herculaneum scrolls were discovered by workers digging up the ancient town of Herculaneum near Pompeii in 1752. But their condition was so bad that, for years, they were considered indecipherable. Thankfully, AI has helped unveil their secrets. Based on the studies so far, experts believe that one of these scrolls was written by a philosopher who valued pleasures, like music and food, above all else. No doubt, Stonehenge in England is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Some theories even suggest it was built by extraterrestrials. After more than a century of research, archaeologists are still figuring out how it came together. See that big altar in the middle? Turns out it came all the way from Scotland. And that's pretty wild, considering this massive sandstone block weighs over 6 tons, and the people who built Stonehenge more than 4,000 years ago didn't have the luxury of wheels or modern tools. We can find some pretty amazing stuff in the oceans too. In 2013, a mysterious shipwreck was found about 20 feet underwater off the coast of Kenya. At the time, no one knew where it came from, but now, researchers are pretty sure this could be a ship from Vasco da Gama's fleet. You know, the famous Portuguese navigator, best known for being the first to sail from Europe to India by rounding Africa's Cape of Good Hope. If it's confirmed, this shipwreck could be one of the earliest European shipwrecks in the Indian Ocean. Ancient treasures can take many forms, including a bottle. Recently, archaeologists in Norway uncovered a 150-year-old message in a bottle during an excavation of a Viking burial mound. The bottle contained a letter written by Anders Lorange, an archaeologist who worked on the site back in the 1800s, along with his business card and a few coins wrapped in paper. The letter gave some details about the excavation, though it seems Lorange got a few things wrong, like the exact number of Viking shields discovered. At the end of the letter, he wrote a personal note in runic script, "Emma Gade, my girlfriend." So it gave us not only insights into history, but also a peek into his love life.
When you think of an epic desert scene with blazing sun, endless dunes, and those magical little oases, you probably picture the legendary Sahara, right? But what if I tell you that 11,000 years ago, this vast expanse of hot sand looked totally different than it does today? Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't around then. But I'm told that back then, what we now call a desert was a lush paradise, brimming with lakes, rivers, grassy plains, and even woodsy forests. So, where did all this water go? There are many stories about the distant past of our planet when deserts were covered with jungles and forests. And then something happened, like changing climates or colossal earthquakes, and it all turned green lands into dunes. But how about a theory that Sahara became a desert because of humans and goats? The Sahara has seen its fair share of wet and dry drama throughout the ages, mostly thanks to little shifts in Earth's orbital tilt, causing variations in how much solar radiation hits the atmosphere. There were even times called the African humid periods, when the rain would pour in and transform the dry landscape into a bright green haven. But between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago, something really funky happened to this region. Certain areas went from humid to dry way too fast to explain it by just orbital changes. In the blink of an eye, the lush Sahara turned into the Sahara we know today. Now, if you ask scientists why it happened, they will tell you, oh, it's just poor parameterization of the data. Bet you didn't get it, did you?
What?
Well, right, let me translate it from scientific to common human. It means they really don't know the answer themselves, and they got a bunch of missing puzzle pieces. But as scientists sifted through ancient dirt and pollen samples, they spotted a quirky trend. Wherever there were pastoralists, also known as humans with their domesticated animals, the plant life seemed to shift. It was as if every time humans and their furry friends meandered through the greenery, they turned it into scrub and desert right behind them. Oops. Yep, chances are that by overgrazing, humans were sapping moisture out of the atmosphere, since plants give off moisture, which helps make clouds and making things even sunnier, leading to a quicker end of the humid vibes. Plus, our ancestors may have been getting a little too cozy with fire for land management, further speeding up the desert takeover. Anyway, scientists are sure that this lush Sahara would have turned back into desert eventually, even if humans hadn't shown up, thanks to Earth's natural rhythms. So there's no need to pin this abrupt change solely on humans. It could simply be about nature getting feedback from vegetation and dust cycles. It's difficult to determine what caused these changes, as it's all interconnected. During the last humid period, the Sahara was filled with hunter-gatherers. As things got a little drier, they started herding animals for food. The weather pushed people to herd cattle. It's also possible that grazing sped up the landscape degradation. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or in this case, the human or the cow? It's tough to tell with the evidence we have now. Now today, it's safe to say that water is no longer that big of a problem in the Sahara, even though it's a huge desert and the times of lush forests there are long gone. But technology's got us covered. For example, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, the biggest underground water stash on the planet. It's nestled beneath the Sahara Desert's eastern edge and stretches across 4 northeastern African countries – Sudan, Chad, Libya, and Egypt, covering a whopping 770,000 square miles and holding around 36,000 square miles of groundwater. Just look at the pipes transported when it was being built. It's the world's largest irrigation project. No wonder it's feasible to thrive in the Sahara today. But imagine thriving in the Sahara Desert with just one water source. Sounds like a tough gig, right? But the ancient Garamantes did just that, surviving and even thriving for nearly 1,000 years without monsoons or rivers flowing to their desert paradise. These clever folks were the trendsetters of urban life in the sands, and even the Romans couldn't help but notice their genius. While many thought they were just desert-dwelling savages, the Garamantes were busy building an empire in one of the toughest climates on Earth. But how did they do that? Well, they got crafty and dug a whole bunch of underground tunnels to tap into a massive sandstone aquifer. They were literally squeezing every drop of life from under the dunes. But recently, research showed that the Garamantes weren't just hardworking, they were pretty lucky too. The Garamantes had an underground aquifer that brought water up to a hill where they built over 500 fogaras, which are irrigation systems, some stretching as long as 2.5 miles. It was like sipping water through a straw, which let them irrigate their crops for nearly a century, especially since even a little rain would help recharge the system. But eventually, due to rain insufficiency, the aquifer ran low, and reaching it again would have meant digging more tunnels and relying on more people. That's a tough problem, considering these people were in the middle of food and water shortages. Guess I don't need to tell you what happened to the Garamantes, do I? The fall of the Garamentian culture might be linked to several factors. It may have been due to climate changes, or they may have simply used their water resources too much. Back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually fertile agricultural land, thanks in part to the cool irrigation system the Garamentians created. But since fossil water isn't something you can replenish over time, the groundwater levels dropped pretty low. This likely played a big role in the kingdom's decline by the late 7th century CE. That sounds like someone who hit a lottery jackpot, used up all the money, and went back to their original not-so-cool job once the bank account got fully drained. Oh, by the way, even if the Garamantes left some secret wisdom messages for us, the chances are we'll never get what they wanted to tell us. Nobody really knows what language they used, and their texts are nearly indecipherable to us today. But let's go back to the Green Sahara. So it transformed into a desert about 4,500 years ago. But today, we can understand how people lived in those times in the Sahara thanks to natural parks in Africa that have the ultimate outdoor art gallery. There are well over 15,000 ancient paintings and carvings depicting everyday life from around 11,000 years ago. However, if the carvings aren't enough for you and you feel like visiting an actual green desert, all you have to do is book a flight to California. One of the most beautiful phenomenon in the world, the superbloom, takes place here. Look at all these colors – orange, green, pink. It's a miracle. Wildflowers bloom right in the middle of a hot desert after several years of rainfall in dry places. It's such a bright and colorful landscape that superblooms can be seen from space. This rare phenomenon can be observed in other arid places and deserts in western and southern Africa, western Australia, and Chile. In all these places, the weather is very hot and dry in summer. Mild humid air comes in winter, and this is the ideal environment for mass flowering. Flower seeds that lie in desert sands can wait for decades before starting to produce flowers. When the hot sun destroys all the weeds and grass, and the rainfall becomes enough to moisten the soil, the seeds are kind of like, well, okay, now it's our turn to play a big game. And then hundreds of thousands of tourists come to take photos and post these beautiful pictures on social media. And this, unfortunately, is one of the main dangers for flowers. Therefore, if you find yourself in a place like this, don't pick the flowers and don't trample on them. Stay on the path, don't litter. Take only pictures and leave only footprints. You get it? Good.
Mirror check. You've got your beige parka on, your chisel is packed, and your overnight plane ride to Saudi Arabia is booked. You know what this means, right? Unfortunately, you weren't cast in the remake of Dune. It just means that you're ready to go explore the world's largest desert areas in the hopes of uncovering prehistoric secrets about our ancestors. Let's get one thing straight. If you ever thought that deserts were empty spaces, think again. They might be filled with sand as far as the eye can see, but they also hold a lot of history, you know, because before humans settled down in cities and towns, we were nomadic people, and we traveled all around the globe looking for food, water, and shelter. So we had to come up with some interesting stuff to survive. Like this thing that was found in the desert of Saudi Arabia. Do you have any idea what this could have been? Over many years, scientists have discussed the origins and use of huge structures such as these ones. It seems our Neolithic ancestors were way smarter than we gave them credit for. They didn't spend all their hours around the fire carving weapons out of stone. No, they were also practicing their architectural skills. These huge stone structures are called desert kites, because if you look at them from a distance, well, they sort of look like kites. Archaeologists have arrived at the consensus that these kites were used to lure animals in. This way, it would make it easier for our ancestors to guarantee their week's food. But that's not all. Take a look at these monolithic structures right here. They show us that our ancestors probably drew on rocks, the blueprint of what they were going to build on the ground. Just like modern-day architects, desert kites could be miles long, so they drew out a plan before actually building them. The most surprising feature of all is that these kites were built even before things such as Stonehenge. We're talking around 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Over the last decade, scientists have been able to identify over 6,000 desert kites spread across the Middle East and West and Central Asia. If you don't think this huge, try building something this large, without the help of any drones. It looks like a pretty difficult feat to me. And apparently, Saudi Arabia's desert is filled with more amazing things. Scientists have found mysterious stone structures that are older than the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. So of course, you can't wait to go check that out. Can we all agree that carrying around heavy rocks to build a pyramid without the help of modern technology sounds absurd? I mean, how on earth did they do it? Now imagine turning back the clock about 2,000 years into the past and finding humans that built similar gigantic structures in isolated areas. Take a look at these so-called mustadels. They are rectangular structures built from piled-up stones, found over 77,000 square miles. Some archaeologists believe that these monuments were used for ritualistic purposes, maybe processions of some kind, where people would walk from one end of the plateau to the other. I'd be down for that. Now let's move on to another deserted area. We're entering the world-famous Sahara Desert landscape. Isn't it beautiful? Here, you're about to unravel an ancient mystery, something that took years for researchers to solve. Fun fact, the Sahara Desert is the world's largest hot desert. It spans over 3 million square miles, which would be like putting 1,000 times the country of Hawaii next to each other. We say it's the largest hot desert because the world's largest desert area is Antarctica. But we all know temperatures over there are freezing, not the typical image of when we think of a desert. Deep into the desert, near the Algerian town of Figurat et Zua, something strange was found. For decades, these tiny dots appeared on images of Google Earth, but nobody could explain what they were. Some scientists were sure that these circles are the result of oil activity in the region. Others guessed that these were ancient fogaras or ancient water wells. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. The strange thing is that they are always far away from any town, road, or human activity in general. So what was or is their purpose? If you had to take a guess, what would you say? Remember we talked about how our ancestors had to be creative in order to survive in the desert? Let's try to walk in their shoes for a minute. Imagine you're a nomadic hunter-gatherer living in a desert area. You spend your days basking in the hot sun, trying to count all the grains of sand around you. But you also need to eat and drink water. But how on earth do you get water in a desert? Sure, you can hope to keep running into oasis every week or so, but that seems a bit risky, doesn't it? That's why North African people invented the so-called fogaras. The fogaras are a 2,500-year-old irrigation system. Locals would dig deep wells in elevated areas, wells deep enough to tap into underground water. Then, they would dig parallel shafts at regular distances. This way, the water would flow from the main well down into all the shafts and irrigate entire areas. Travelers could stop by the shafts and quench their thirst. They could also raise livestock and tend to crops. Pretty clever, huh? As much as these holes did look like fogaras, a little bit of research would show you that they're not. You see, these shafts were built in a line, and not in a circular shape like the ones we're looking at now. So maybe it has something to do with the second option? Maybe these desert holes were related to oil activity in the region? Let's have a look at the holes up close and personal. From Google Earth, they don't seem that big, but in real life, they are huge craters. The tip to uncovering what they are is hidden beneath the sand. If you were one of the researchers originally uncovering the truth behind this mystery, you would have found something unique hidden in the sand. Old dynamites and vintage sardine cans. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together, scientists found that these sardine cans were a model from the 1950s and 1960s. It seems that entire teams from that decade would camp out while they surveyed the area for oil. And what about the dynamites? These were used for seismic surveying. This is an old technique, used to identify if there is oil and gas beneath the Earth's surface. Still in North Africa, you find out about another desert mystery worth exploring. Near the city of Tiaret, southwest of Algeria's capital, one runs into 13 peculiar monuments. These structures are also called Djadars, and yes, I am aware of how much that may sound like a Star Wars reference. They are pyramid-like in their shapes, and as far as scientists know, they were used as final resting places for the people who lived in the region. Can you guess who these were? Most likely the Berber nomads. And since we're talking about ancient stuff, they were probably built between the 4th and 7th centuries CE. Once scientists began to explore the insides of these monuments, they found they were pretty big inside. They found large underground vaults, chambers, and labyrinth-like corridors that gave way to over 20 compartments. It could take you up to 2 hours to walk around in them, and apparently our ancestors also used its walls to depict images of animals and hunting scenes. There's no definite proof of what these jadars were used for, though. This is so neat, huh? I'm sure that our world's desert is filled with many more mysterious things for us to unravel. I guess I'll see you next time so that we can continue our explorations.
Researchers have found almost 1,000 previously hidden Maya settlements in the tropical lowlands of what is now northern Guatemala. They did it with LiDAR, light detection and ranging lasers, which they used to scan areas from the air. The region we're talking about is pretty vast. All those structures and buildings they saw over there stretch across about 650 square miles. And these spots were supposedly occupied thousands of years ago. It seems all these structures were pretty densely packed, so people lived close to each other. They had at least 417 ancient villages, towns, and cities where they could identify boundaries. These structures and buildings were actually a part of a state that looked like a kingdom. Some of these settlements were built as sports courts, civic, ceremonial, and religious centers, and residential homes. There were also massive palaces, platforms, dams, pyramids, and causeways across that area. People who lived there also had reservoirs where they collected water. So, they needed the power to organize thousands of specialists and workers. And they also needed many skilled people to build such structures without the technologies we have today. They needed lime producers, architects, mortar and quarry specialists, lithic technicians, those who took care of legal enforcement, and other important roles to establish the true community. This cool laser scanning system researchers used while exploring this area can even penetrate very dense ecosystems and vegetation. The light bounces off different surfaces and then creates a digitally reconstructed map. This map is based on how much time it takes for the pulses to get back to a receiver. So, with this laser system, they discovered there were also lowlands for agriculture. So why exactly did the Maya settle in this region? It was a specific area. Plus, it was hard to build such an amazing kingdom in a tropical rainforest climate. Back in the old times, ancient peoples had mostly inhabited areas in drier climates. Over there, they would build water resources, which were some sort of the basis of society and a source of life. An example of this is Teotihuacan of highland Mexico, although they did have a couple of navigable rivers they could use for transport and trade. But these rainforest areas had their advantages too. The Maya used natural resources like limestone, which was their primary building material, salt, and the volcanic rock obsidian, which they used for different tools. Also, they managed to find enough dry land to live and build homes there. The lowlands were seasonal swamps called bajos, and they were perfect for agriculture because of the fertile soil. Generally, the Maya built settlements that could endure rainy periods too. They were ready for different circumstances, including flood and drought, which is something you could see in how they built houses. Their architecture was also one piece of evidence that showed their community was like a centralized kingdom-like state, which shows they stuck together through tough times. The Mayan Empire was very powerful, and it reached its peak about the 6th century CE. They were excellent at pottery, agriculture, writing, mathematics, and calendars. They were the ones who created complex calendar systems, such as the calendar round, which is based on 365 days. Although some believed the Mayan calendar predicted December 21st, 2012 would be the end of the world, it was just a coincidence with the end of a certain full cycle. They would call it the long count calendar, and it lasts 5,125 years. The Mayan people left behind an impressive amount of astonishing architecture and symbolic artwork. Most of their stone cities ended up abandoned by 900 CE. No one still knows why the Mayan civilization in that area collapsed, although there are some theories. Some think that by the 9th century, these people had exhausted the resources around them to the point that they could no longer feed and sustain such a big population. Others believe some city-states didn't get along that well, so they broke down the traditional system of power they used to have. Some say it was all because of a very long period of drought. It could be a combination of all these factors, though. But one Mayan city, located on an island, even survived until the 17th century. It was long after the rest of the Mayan civilizations had been destroyed or abandoned. If you're a traveler, you might know the town by its modern name, Flores. Scientists believe about 2,000 people lived there. The earliest Maya people were farmers. They cultivated crops like beans, squash, corn, and cassava. As they had many interesting ingredients, they created hundreds of cool recipes. Many of those are still present even today. For example, in modern Mexican cooking. And especially popular are papayas, cacao, avocados, squash, pineapples, chili peppers, beans, and so on. Even though the Maya mostly practiced a kind of primitive type of slash-and-burn agriculture, there is also evidence of them using some more advanced farming methods, like terracing and irrigation. And they were big chocolate lovers. More than 3,500 years ago, the Olmecs of Mesoamerica probably turned out to be the first to realize that it takes some work for us to get such a cool thing as chocolate. But the Maya were the ones who turned it into a true form of art. Scientists found out about it when they found cacao in Mayan pottery. Their chocolate would be mixed with honey, water, cornmeal, and chili peppers. That's how you get a spicy, savory, hot chocolate beverage you can try even today in Mexico and Central America. Also, they used written language in their books. Their paper was made from fig tree bark, and using strips of that paper, they created a large library of books. Books made of this material are called codices, and 4 of these can still be found today. Sadly, many books were lost over time because of the humid climate or some human factors. The classic Maya built a bunch of palaces and temples that had a stepped pyramid shape. They decorated them with inscriptions and reliefs, which have earned them the reputation of being incredible artists of Mesoamerica. For the Mayans, flat foreheads were the most desirable thing on someone's face. They were generally really into aesthetics, and having a flat forehead was one of the main things where you could meet their highest aesthetic standard. They also liked to glam up their looks with makeup and clothing. Also, the Mayans were master tattoo artists. Actually, they were one of the first civilizations that started doing such forms of body art. They had a rich culture and believed in many things, such as fairies. Many civilizations across the globe believed in these mythical creatures, which had different names everywhere. The Mayans called those creatures aluxes. They would make sculptures of aluxes from wood or clay, take them to the forest, and hide in some secret spots. The Maya believed these sculptures would come to life during the night and take the role of guardians of their land, animals, and crops. The Maya believed caves were entrances that led to the underworld. You can even visit some of these caves if you like. For example, you can explore the jungles of Quintana Roo and Yucatan near Cancun. There are many spots where researchers found artifacts the Mayans had left behind. They were one of the first cultures that learned how to use rubber latex and make, for example, rubber balls for the many interesting games they had. They used natural latex and then probably mixed it with some other natural substances. That's how they came up with the bouncy balls they played with. They also built cool steam baths. The Maya had structures made from stone that looked like something we know today as bathtubs. Plus, they were building heated stone structures we know as sweat houses. Researchers found these in El Salvador and Guatemala, and they were previously hidden under volcanic ash.